Have you ever thought to yourself, wow, Israel, for such a small country, is in the news a lot. I sure would like to know more about that. Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I wish that there was a young, attractive American to tell you about all of these issues? Well, look no further. I've gotten the green light from my benevolent corporate overlords to provide you this show. The goal of it, I'm going to break down stories that we receive about Israel and the Middle East and explain it to you in a way that doesn't require a PhD in Middle Eastern politics to understand. So, without further ado, my name is Jared White, and this is JNEWS. Hey everybody! I got a great show for you today. Very excited. I have an open letter to the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Mr. Nickolay Mladenov. But first, question of the day. Do you think that the United Nations is biased against Israel? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. So, this letter was written by a disgruntled staffer at the Jerusalem Institute of Justice, my place of work. And he has taken issue with some of the comments that Mr. Mladenov has said. The letter is titled, An Open Letter to Nickolay Mladenov, Supposed Promoter of Peace in the Middle East. So, without further ado, let us start. Dear Mr. Mladenov, your latest comments regarding the Israel-Gaza conflict leave me feeling confused. You are quoted saying, if the UN stopped talking to Israelis and Palestinians about peace, Israel would come off a lot worse in the world media. From that comment, I can infer that you mean that the UN is helping Israel's image in the rest of the world. I would very much like to hear you explain how the UN does just that, because that is not how it seems. He goes on to say, was the UN attempting to support Israel's image when the UN passed a resolution against Israel for Israel's response to the Gaza border fence riots? It was admitted by Hamas officials prior to the voting of the resolution that 50 of the 62 people killed during the riot were Hamas terrorists. Knowing this, though, the UN still voted 120 to 8 that Israel used excessive force. Resolutions like this unfairly target Israel and make it appear, Mr. Mladenov, that the UN is not preventing the worsening of Israel's world image, like you say, but instead advocating for it. He then goes on to say, supporting Israel doesn't mean having to say positive things about the Jewish state all the time. It could simply mean being unbiased by disavowing countries or groups that attack Israel. One clear example would be Hamas, the terrorist organization in charge of the Gaza Strip. Let's see. He says, you don't have to look far to find just one instance of Hamas doing something worth condemning. He gives 3 examples for you. 1. Hamas fires rockets from heavily populated areas into Israel, which puts Gazan civilians at risk. 2. Hamas places military compounds in the basements of schools and hospitals, which endangers children and the sick. 3, and this is the most recent one, Hamas sent terrorists to the Gaza border fence in an attempt to use the riot as a smokescreen to, quote, and this is a quote from the leader of Hamas, Ahaya Samayim, this guy. He says, tear down the border and tear the hearts out of Jewish bodies. Man, he sounds like a swell guy. I'd love to introduce him to my future daughter. He says, if the UN really cared about fairly representing the Israel-Gaza conflict, wouldn't the UN condemn some of these actions by Hamas? Goes on to talk about Nikki Haley, the US ambassador to the UN. He says, just recently, Nikki Haley proposed a resolution to condemn Hamas's violent border riots. But what happened? The proposal didn't even receive a 2/3 majority in the UN General Assembly. Why couldn't the UN pass such an obvious wrongdoing by Hamas? This complete unwillingness to condemn even the most obvious violations gives the appearance that the UN does not want to support both sides, as you say, but instead only criticize Israel. He continues his article by telling Mr. Mladenov what his job is. He says, your job as the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process is to, quote, and this is pulled from the UN website, lead the UN system in all political and diplomatic efforts related to the peace process in the Middle East, yada, 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 in support of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people. He says, The territory that you are supporting currently, Gaza, the people in charge is Hamas, the terrorist organization. I'm sure you've heard of them, Mr. Mladenov. Let's see. He says, does your agency support legitimizing that terrorist group by giving them a country to control? How does supporting a group whose mission is to destroy Israel show Israelis that the UN is trying to protect Israel's world image? He finishes his article by saying what the point or the mission of the United Nations is. He says, the UN is designed to prevent conflict. Instead of preparing for battle, countries should be able to come before the UN and come to understandings with one another to prevent bloodshed. But when the UN consistently attacks only one side, it makes a state believe that their voice doesn't matter, or even worse, that the UN is against them. He says, Israel has time and time again shown restraint against all of the enemies that surround him, but Hamas shows no restraint in its plans to destroy Israel, kill Jews, and doing all of that while risking the lives of its own citizens. You say that the UN helps support Israel's image on the world stage, but your actions show the exact opposite. So change my mind about that, Mr. Mladenov. Constantly waiting, a concerned intern of the Jerusalem Institute of Justice. Needless to say, Mr. Mladenov's comments have sparked some controversy, and we will update you with any news about them. So until then, my name is Jared White, and this is JNEWS. Hey there! I hope you liked this video. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and YouTube at Jerusalem Institute of Justice to get more videos like this. Make sure to hit that subscription button and hit the little notifying bell to be notified of upcoming videos. Also, follow us on Twitter at JIJ_Israel. And of course, go onto our website at jij.org to read other articles and other things that we post. Comments, feedback, fatwas, they're all appreciative here. So let us know what you think in the comment section of wherever you are on the internet. So, my name is Jared White. This is JNEWS.